So Blender 5.0 just came out today and it has quite a few new cool features in it. But I just wanted to focus on one very specific change that has come to Blender 5.0 that's relevant to me because I like rendering volumetrics. So Blender 5.0 contains a new rendering algorithm for volumetrics called null scattering. Now, I made a video on this channel a couple months ago about it, and I was very concerned at how it would impact volume rendering in Blender because I like my clouds and it was giving me some performance issues. But uh, you'll be happy to know that the Blender developers took our feedback and integrated it in the best possible way, I think. So in Blender 5.0, by default, you'll have, when you open it up, you'll see this volumes tab. You'll just see this bias checkbox. There's no step rate parameters or max steps anywhere. So this is off by default, but if you turn it back on, you can get control over the all the parameters that you had previously. So it basically reverts to the old rendering algorithm, which is called ray marching. And this is very handy for some types of scenes, but I want to cover in which areas null scattering, which is the new algorithm, shines, in which areas it might be advantageous to use the old rendering algorithm. So without further ado, let's get into it. So I want to briefly talk about what quote-unquote biased actually means in the context of volumetric rendering. Basically, biased rendering as a whole is when you're sort of sacrificing realism for either quicker computation or more artistic freedom. And in this case, we're kind of sacrificing that raw realism for that extra freedom. And it also happens to be, in a lot of cases, a little bit quicker, but we'll talk about performance in a little bit. But I have two volumes here. I have one that is a sphere and it's quite dense, and I have one that's just a very not dense cube. And I'm going to turn on biased rendering, and I want you to pay attention to what changed. So notice how this cube right here looks pretty much the same, right? But this sphere, we can see that the terminator line, which is where the lit part transitions into the shadowed part, that just completely changes position. So basically what this bias checkbox does is it kind of transfers the responsibility of determining this step rate from the renderer onto us. So we now have direct control over that instead of it being automatically assumed by the renderer. But this also means that we can kind of break the realism of the shader. So for instance, if I turn this step rate all the way up, you can see that now this sphere looks very, very thin, very wispy. Meanwhile, it should be really dense, right? So the reason why this effect happens with the sphere and not with the cube is because as we increase the step rate, paradoxically, we're sort of reducing the amount of detail that we're picking up in the volume. It's a little bit more complex than that, and I'll put a video link on the screen with a little bit more explanation of what a quote-unquote step actually is. But that's basically what you need to know. We're getting a bit less detail in the volume as we increase the step rate. But there's kind of a little pickle in that we can only, some volumes, like this dense or this very wispy volume, they don't have much detail. So we're getting, there's a point at which you get extremely diminishing returns, or essentially zero return for increasing the amount of steps that you want to take. Or in this case, decreasing the step rate beyond a certain point. And for like these really light volumes like this, like there's literally zero difference between like a step rate of 10 and a step rate of 1. But a step rate of 10 will render a lot faster than a step rate of 0.1. But it completely messes up the sphere, right? But this is where this sort of unbiased rendering algorithm comes in, and it's really handy because it kind of automatically selects the step rate that you need based off of the properties and the densities of the volumes. So it'll use a less aggressive step rate, or actually, I guess in this case, more aggressive step rate for this very wispy volume, and it'll use a very conservative step rate for this dense volume, right? So it's very handy in kind of balancing the weight of different volumetric objects in your scene. But I want to talk about where biased rendering can actually be a massive help, because if we just left it off at that last point, you might be thinking, okay, so it just handles more stuff for me in a very precise and nice way. But the difficulty with that is that sometimes certain shaders, for instance, this cloud shader, don't actually need unbiased sort of treatment. We can infuse them with a little bit of bias and save us a lot of headache with performance and stuff. And we can really drastically improve the handling of the scene. So this is the unbiased, this is a cloud, this is the unbiased rendering. And there's a couple issues with this. One of these that you might have noticed before is that there's kind of some noise around the borders of some of these shapes, which is a little weird. I don't know if that's a bug or if that's going to get fixed, or if that's just part of the rendering. Could be either. But if we turn on this biased checkbox, we can see I've set up our step rates and, more importantly, this max steps, so that we can get a very plausible looking cloud shader that performs like 10 times faster, right? So it's a matter of figuring out what's in your scene that you could benefit from having control, more direct control over that step rate, versus if you're completely okay to just let the renderer handle it. In a lot of cases, the renderer will do pretty fine. But if you're running into performance hurdles, or you want to see if you can optimize your scene to make it go a little bit faster, it can be worth it to try and mess around with the ray marching, the biased rendering. In my case, I'm going to still be using the biased rendering quite a bit because, as you can see here, clouds massively benefit from it. And yeah, uh, thank you very much for watching. We have a pretty cool Discord server down below in the description that you can join, with a bunch of very, very talented people. And I also have a link to a couple of my products, namely KTT for Houdini, which is a very cool terrain generation program or plugin, if you want to pick that up as well. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you guys later. Bye.